Have you ever found yourself halfway through a project, only to realize that the original plan has expanded far beyond what was initially agreed upon? Hi, I'm Andrew from PM Aspirant. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. We dive into all things project management to help you ace your certification and improve your project management skills. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our tips and strategies. Let's get into today's topic, scope creep. So, what exactly is scope creep? In simple terms, it's when a project's scope expands beyond its original boundaries without corresponding adjustments to time, resources, or costs. It is one of the most common challenges project managers face. This often happens when stakeholders request additional features, tasks, or deliverables after the project has already begun, but there's no formal process in place to manage those changes. While some flexibility is necessary in any project, uncontrolled changes, what we call scope creep, can lead to missed deadlines, budget overruns, and strained resources. That's why understanding how to manage scope creep is essential for project success. In the Waterfall or traditional project management framework, scope creep is seen as a significant risk and must be tightly controlled. The reason? In Waterfall, the scope is usually fixed up front. Detailed planning is done early in the project, particularly in the define scope and create work breakdown structure phases. Any changes after this point are considered deviations and need to go through a formal process. Waterfall relies on a change control process to manage scope creep. When a new request comes in, it's not just added to the project. The project manager needs to document the change request, assess its impact on time, cost, and quality, seek approval from the change control board or project sponsor before proceeding. This process ensures that any change is fully evaluated before it's accepted, helping to prevent uncontrolled scope expansion. To prevent scope creep in Waterfall projects, it's crucial for the project manager to stay vigilant. Frequent scope reviews, clear communication with stakeholders, and ensuring that any scope changes are formally approved are key strategies. If you are preparing for the PMP exam, here's a good rule of thumb. Scope creep is highly undesirable in Waterfall because it disrupts the planned schedule and budget. The change control process is your best friend for managing scope in this environment. On the other hand, Agile project management takes a different approach to scope creep. In Agile, changing requirements are expected and even embraced, particularly in response to customer feedback or evolving project needs. In Agile, scope isn't fixed at the beginning of the project. Instead, it's flexible and can change from sprint to sprint based on what the customer or stakeholders need. Changes to the scope are typically handled through backlog refinement and prioritization. New features or changes are added to the product backlog and then prioritized for future iterations. Since Agile teams work in short cycles, known as sprints, they can quickly adapt to new requirements. This adaptability makes Agile particularly well-suited to projects where the final outcome may not be fully known at the start. But even in Agile, there are still boundaries. Uncontrolled additions to a sprint are discouraged. Any new requirements that come up mid-sprint should be evaluated and scheduled for future sprints. Regular backlog grooming and prioritization ensure that the team stays focused on the most important tasks. For the PMP exam, remember that in Agile, scope creep isn't as problematic because change is welcomed. However, it's still managed carefully through backlog management and iterative development. Next, let's talk about hybrid project management, which combines elements of both Waterfall and Agile methodologies. Hybrid projects offer the flexibility of Agile and the structure of Waterfall, but managing scope creep can be more complex. In hybrid, scope creep is handled differently depending on the phase of the project. In Waterfall phases, scope changes are managed through a formal change control process, similar to what we discussed earlier. In Agile phases, scope changes are managed through backlog refinement and iteration planning. The project manager must strike a balance between the strict scope control of Waterfall and the flexibility of Agile. For instance, during the requirements gathering phase, which may follow a Waterfall approach, scope changes must go through formal approvals. But during development, which may be Agile, scope can be more fluid. In hybrid, the project manager needs to adapt their approach depending on the phase of the project. They must decide when to be flexible and when to enforce strict scope control. This balancing act is critical to ensuring that scope creep doesn't derail the project. For the PMP exam, know that hybrid requires a blend of Agile's flexibility and Waterfall's control when managing scope changes. Regardless of which project management framework you're using, There are some universal strategies you can apply to prevent and manage scope creep. 1. Clear requirements. Whether you're in a waterfall or agile environment, make sure your requirements are clear. In waterfall, capture detailed requirements up front, and in agile, gather them incrementally with continuous stakeholder engagement. 2. Formal change control. In waterfall and hybrid environments, make sure you have a formal process in place to handle changes. Every change should go through the proper channels for approval. 3. Frequent communication. Regular communication with stakeholders is key. This ensures that everyone understands the project's scope and is on the same page when changes come up. 4. Backlog prioritization. In agile and hybrid environments, prioritize changes in the backlog to ensure that only the most important items are worked on. 5. Project baselines. In waterfall, having clear baselines for scope, time, and cost allows you to track deviations and manage scope creep effectively. By following these strategies, you can keep scope creep in check and ensure that your project stays on track. So what should you focus on for the PMP exam when it comes to scope creep? In waterfall, scope creep is tightly controlled and changes must go through a formal change control process. In agile, scope creep is expected and managed through the product backlog. Flexibility is a core principle. In hybrid, scope creep is managed based on the phase of the project. The project manager must balance control and flexibility depending on whether the phase follows agile or waterfall methodologies. The most important tip for exam success: understand how scope creep is handled in each methodology. Focus on the change control process in waterfall, backlog management in agile, and the adaptive approach in hybrid. To wrap up, scope creep is one of the most common challenges in project management. By understanding how to manage it in different frameworks, whether waterfall, agile, or hybrid, you can keep your project on track and ensure its success. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to PM Aspirant for more project management insights. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.